Welcome back. It is now time for our scripture reading. And my scripture today is from the Lamsa translation of the Bible, Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 45. Then Jesus came with them to a place which is called Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, "Sit down here while I go to pray." And he took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, and began to be sorrowful and depressed. He said to them, "My soul is sorrowful, even to death. Wait for me here and watch for me." And he went a little further and fell on his face and prayed, saying, "O Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me, but let it be not as I will, but as thou wilt." Then he came to his disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, "So you were not able to watch with me even for 1 hour? Awake and pray, that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit is ready, but the body is weak." He went away again, and the second time, and prayed and said, "O my Father, if this cup cannot pass, and if I must drink from it, let it be according to thy will." He came again and found them sleeping, for their eyes were heavy. And he left them and went away again and prayed the third time and said the same words. Then he came to his disciples and said to them, "Sleep from now on and get your rest. Behold, the hour has come, and the Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of sinners." Thus ends the reading of our scripture, Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 45. The Easter season began a few weeks ago with Ash Wednesday on February 14th. In Christianity, the period between Ash Wednesday and sundown on Holy Thursday is referred to as Lent. It is a 40-day season of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. It is a very solemn time, and it commemorates the 40 days Jesus spent fasting in the desert to overcome his temptations. Today, we will learn more about the Lenten and Easter season from a metaphysical perspective. We believe this period of prayer and fasting is a time to prepare ourselves by overcoming our own temptations, the temptations of our humanity, and a time to deny ourselves of error thinking. Our spiritual journey began with the birth of our Christ consciousness that we celebrated at Christmas. Now we're at a point where we're coming full circle to the realization of the Christ consciousness, maturing and growing from infancy into adulthood. During Lent, many Christians fast. Metaphysically, we view fasting not as denying ourselves from certain foods, but rather of denying oneself of error thinking. And what is error thinking? It is when our thinking is not aligned with truth. We want to be the master of our thoughts. And in mastering them, exercising discipline and filtering what we do and don't want to think, or filtering what is not leading to our growth and spiritual progression. With intention and purpose, we align our thoughts with truth and with our higher purpose. And as we tie our scripture today together with Easter, I want you to keep in mind that metaphysically, the crucifixion represents completion. It means we have completed a certain phase of our growth. Now that we have mastered it, we can release it. We don't have to carry it any longer. It is done. It is finished. Now, for some, the road to this destination may be filled with potholes and bumps. This is what we refer to as trials and tribulations. Or better yet, I like to think of them as lessons. It is through these lessons that we learn and we grow. Keeping this in mind, we will turn to our scripture lesson to understand more about what Jesus was going through when he entered the Garden of Gethsemane and the symbology of this stage in his spiritual progression. He was preparing himself. He was preparing for the resurrection of the Christ in him. He came into this world to attain his own realization of this Christ consciousness. But he also came here to teach each of us this same awareness is within us. He led by example, teaching us what we need to do to attain this elevated state of consciousness. In some of his final days, he entered into the Garden of Gethsemane. This is one of the final phases he went through to overcome his ego or his humanity. The Metaphysical Bible Dictionary states that Gethsemane symbolizes the struggle that takes place within our consciousness when truth is realized as the one reality. All the good is pressed out and saved, and the error is denied. Sometimes this can be agony. The suffering that the soul undergoes in giving up its cherished idols, letting go of human consciousness. You will hear me refer to this throughout my sermon as our humanity. This is speaking about that part of us that knows the truth. We know the truth, but yet we struggle internally with those things that tug at us from a worldly level. The truth is realized as the one reality, an aha moment in our spiritual growth. and we keep all the good, and we let go of the error. For some, this may be difficult to give up the cherished idols of the world. So how we overcome these obstacles? How do we live in this world, but yet not let it hold us back, hold us back? We turn to the Spirit of God within, and we seek a higher level of understanding. In our meditation, we ask ourselves, how would we handle this situation from a spiritual perspective instead of a humanly perspective? And as we do this, we begin to move beyond the worldly thoughts, and we become in harmony with the one reality, which is God. We want to enter the Garden of Gethsemane and make this space in our life to intentionally eliminate the old ways of thinking and keep that spiritual truth and wisdom that's guiding and driving us to self-realization. Our scripture says, then Jesus came with them to a place which is called Gethsemane, and he said to his disciples, sit down here while I go to pray. And he took Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, and began to be sorrowful and depressed. When Jesus went to Gethsemane, he took Peter, James, and John with him. Peter represents our faith. John represents our spiritual faculty of love. And James, our judgment. Faith is the first of his faculties that he called on. There may be times in our life where there is nothing but us and our faith to help us through challenges and certain situations. Faith helps us believe there is a higher purpose, and to reach that point of knowing we are headed in the right direction, knowing that if we can just stay the course, we can and will get through it. Scripture goes on to say, then he came to his disciples and found them sleeping. And he said to Peter, so you were not able to watch over me even for an hour? He's struggling. And he realizes Peter, or his faith, went to sleep on him. It was almost as if he's disappointed. You can't even watch over me for an hour? There are times we may feel all alone and that our faith has gone to sleep on us. At these moments, that is when we dig deeper within ourselves. And as we do, we realize our inner strength and we reawaken our faith, staying committed to our path and allowing our inner strength to propel us forward. Jesus awakens his faith and he reminds him to pray so he does not enter into temptation. He said, "The spirit is ready. The spirit is ready, but the body is weak." This symbolizes that tug of war within, in our heart and deep within our spirit. We know what we should do, and we know what we need to do. But on a human level, it's easier said than done. It takes courage to follow the spirit when the mind is telling us something else. People who are unhappy in a job or relationship, sometimes they stay because they fear the unknown. If I leave, what will happen to me? We know what we need to do. Sometimes struggle with finding the courage to make these changes. And there are points in our life where we find ourselves walking in blind faith. Years ago, I was in a relationship and my spirit kept urging me to leave. I was in my early 30s and I didn't want to give up the American dream of a white picket fence, 2-car garage, and a happy family. Almost as American as apple pie and Chevrolet. But deep within, I just felt it wasn't the right relationship for me. The voice wouldn't go away. And it got louder and louder until it got my attention. And one day I listened. I listened to my inner guidance and ended the relationship. It took a tremendous amount of inner strength, but I had the faith that it was what was best for me. Oh, yes, it was painful, but I knew I had to do it. I had to follow my spirit. I overcame the desires of what I perceived was important from a worldly level, and I chose what was best for my spirit. Have you ever felt as though when you were in the darkest part of the tunnel, that your faith had gone to sleep on you? That is what happened to Jesus. He took what he needed the most with him when he went to the garden. He took his faith, his judgment, and spiritual love, and he felt as though they were not there for him when he needed them the most. Regardless, he never lost his faith in God, and he stayed the course. This is that pivotal point where we have to make the choice. Do we stay the course and trust? Or do we run the other direction? We trust and we stay the course. Scripture says he went away again, and the second time, and prayed and said, "O my Father, if this cup cannot pass, and if I must drink from it, let it be according to thy will." He goes on to say, the flesh is weak, but the spirit is strong. Now remember, Jesus knew what lie ahead. And his physical self is asking God to let this cup pass from him. But yet, his spirit is saying, but if it cannot, I will accept what is in store for me. He is saying, let God's will be done, not my will. He surrendered himself to the will of God. And Jesus is praying to the will of that small God within him to be stronger than his physical will. And when we surrender to the capital God, what are we doing? We are surrendering our humanity to the spiritual. We are surrendering to the will of God. We are saying, I trust the Spirit of God within me to guide me. And whatever happens, I know it is what is best for me. 3 times he asks, why have you gone to sleep on me when I need you the most? Can't you see? I need you now more than ever. Jesus's prayers in the Garden of Gethsemane are his last pleas from his humanity. He is showing us that he too is human, just as we are. He too feels as though everything he relied on wasn't there for him when he needed it the most. How else can we learn from these valuable lessons if we can't identify with him? He was here to be a teacher. And this is that last step before we let go and surrender to the will of God. And it's an important step for the completion of this lesson. It's interesting because sometimes, we read scripture and we interpret it and we try to garner that lesson. And as I was reading this scripture today, at the end of the scripture, he tells his faith and judgment and spiritual truth, that's okay. You can go back to sleep. You can go back to sleep because the hour has come. And as I was reading this today, what was impressed upon me was at that point, he was telling them they could go back to sleep because he had transcended that physical. Those are physical aspects of ourselves. And he had transcended into the spiritual. It's again that pivotal point because those are physical faculties. Those are human faculties. So just wanted to share that with you. Something else to think about. During these final weeks before Easter, we evaluate where we are on our path. And in the solitude of our meditation, contemplate what, if anything, is blocking our path to self and God realization. As Jesus did, we enter into the Garden of Gethsemane. We enter into that state of consciousness so that we may face and overcome any remaining struggles, so truth may be realized as our one reality. And we take with us our faith, our judgment, and our spiritual faculty of love to help us in overcoming any human limitations standing in the way. But as I mentioned, we get to that point where once we've mastered that, we move beyond that. At times, we may feel as though everything and everyone we rely on has gone to sleep on us when we are struggling. But as he did, we stay the course, going deep, deep within ourselves to find the strength to overcome and transcend these humanly struggles and limitations so that we may complete the same lesson of overcoming our humanity and resurrecting our Christ consciousness. Many blessings to you on this sacred journey of this Easter season. Namaste.